Hey guys, this is Robert Breedlove from the What is Money Show. And as you've learned by watching this show, Bitcoin is the single most important asset you can own in the 21st century. And one of the most important companies in Bitcoin today is NYDIG. NYDIG's mission is to facilitate financial security for all. They accomplish this by bringing a high level of professionalization and sophistication to the Bitcoin marketplace. As a true game changer in the industry, NYDIG is safely unlocking the power of Bitcoin for forward-thinking individuals and institutions alike. By using NYDIG, you will gain access to an end-to-end institutional-grade platform, providing Bitcoin OTC transactions, Bitcoin collateralized borrowing, secure custody, asset management, derivatives, financing, market research, and more. And all of these services meet the highest regulatory, governance, and audit standards. Led by Robbie Gutman, Yin Zhao, and Ross Stevens, NYDIG has absolutely exploded onto the Bitcoin scene recently and is leading the way for ongoing institutional adoption in this nascent asset class. So please be sure to check out NYDIG as a single source for all your Bitcoin needs.
Derived from a chapter in your book called The Future of Intelligence. And I think people have a common belief that intelligence is some super sophisticated thing that only really humans have, or we have in a capacity above all other animals. But I think your book does a great job of simplifying it, and that at its most in the most basic sense, intelligence is just error correction. So it's an adjustment, I guess, between our mental model of reality and what reality actually is. And the continuous adjustment is the process of intelligence, effectively. So it's not just something that's expressed in the human mind, it's also something that's expressed in markets, and other, I guess, forms of pattern recognition and fitting. So I think this is so interesting how intelligence itself, which clearly got us to the modern age, is actually being changed or impacted by the tools we use in the modern age. So I guess the big idea here is that intelligence is error correction, and we'd like to explore where are we going with this? How is technology going to change the way we error correct, recognize patterns, and what does it look like going forward, where humans aren't the most, or not, I guess, not the only intelligent force in the world.
Yeah, and that chapter, it's a very big idea, and it challenges radically our perception of reality and what's next. And we'll walk through kind of why that's true, or why I believe it's true, but let's dig into that a little bit more. But I will say this: one of the top economists, when he was reading the book, he's also pretty deep in AI. When he asked, when he was challenging me on this, and said, why is this different this time? And I said, for one, this concept changes everything. If you just say one day computers will be smarter than us, you could say that's in 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, 80 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter. But if one day computers are going to be smarter than us, how possibly could we create more jobs so that has to be deflationary for the whole world. But it means a whole bunch of other stuff, and we might not want that to be true, but it doesn't change the facts that it is true. And so let's explore that big idea about intelligence really is error correction.
Yeah, the quote from your book that gave me a very visceral sense of how big of a deal this is you said, quote, "If electricity was a match, then artificial intelligence is the sun." And clearly, all of us in our day-to-day lives electricity has become so commonplace, it's taken for granted. You know, it's largely invisible. You expect the light to come on when you walk in a room and you hit the switch. Your refrigerator keeps food, cold for you, or your freezer keeps food frozen for you for weeks and months on end. It's given us a totally new way to handle energy. And now we have, artificial intelligence, which could actually start to, I guess with robotics and process automation, we have innovated away a lot of the more mechanical, physical jobs, right? We've moved away from the Henry Ford assembly line to the robotic assembly line for building automobiles, for instance. But now we're talking about innovating and automating away more white collar or cerebral type jobs. And, this is just, to the point of the book, when other tools provide work more efficiently than humans, this is destructive to jobs, even though it's a net benefit for society, right? We're creating more outputs per unit of input. The transition is what I guess is resisted typically by people. The accountants and the lawyers and all of these other investment bankers, whatever the positions may be that are at risk, they're going to resist a change like this. So where do you see us today on that journey? Where are we on the spectrum of transition to something like a general, I guess you'd call this general purpose AI?
So let's break that down into kind of in general purpose AI. When computers are, so what they say is the morning that the computer is smarter than us, that the evening it's smarter than all of us. So that the kind of the rate of growth. We don't have general purpose AI today. Humans are still better at seeing patterns from a different field and attracting it to making an analog to a different field and saying what that looks like. But in narrow artificial intelligence, machine learning, computers are the pace of growth is incredible. And if you just think about how we learn, what we do is we practice over and over and over again, error correcting. And that's how our job families are all built. The best of us know more. We see patterns that nobody else sees because of the practice we put into something. And actually, we go super deep. And in some cases, we miss the forest for the trees because we're so deep into the narrow thing too. So it's not like just computers get caught there. We do too. In fact, this whole radical change of society that's coming, why most people are missing it, is because they're caught in an old pattern. But let's just take that narrow intelligence for a moment. Human beings have to make choices, compromises in your biological computer of what you see, what you don't see, what you experience, and your version of reality is referenced back, and you're slowly correcting that in anything, and you're slowly correcting errors. Over time, you get really good at a narrow something. And to kind of, if remember the old 10,000 hours of practice,
Yeah,
10,000 hours of practice to create excellence. It doesn't guarantee excellence in any thing, but 10,000 hours of dedicated practice to something can make you an expert. But our time runs out because 10,000 hours is a lot of time. It's 10 years of full-time work to get 10,000 hours in something. And we have to make a choice of 10,000 hours on piano, or 10,000 hours at football, or 10,000 hours at something else, or 10,000. And so those choices put us down a path, or being a doctor or something else. And you go narrow and deep. All the while it's doing this same thing. And in that choice, we can't see all of the other things. We can't see all the information because we have to choose the information that we're looking at. And computers can see more information and they can error correct against that information. So that's what machine learning really looks like. Taking a whole bunch of inputs and looking at an output and adjusting the dials. The machine is adjusting the weights and dimensions about things that we might have not have seen that look like magic that a computer sees. And we misunderstand how fast that's moving first. first computers to beat chess champions. A lot of people said that couldn't happen because that's domain of humans. We're better at it, and then it eclipsed it. Go, the best computer scientists didn't think we would do that until mid this decade, and that eclipsed 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then the same program that all of the computer science wrote to be able to do that was beaten by a system that wrote itself. And so how fast this is happening is staggering. We talk about Moore's law in everything else in technology. AI is advancing at a rate that is hard to even comprehend. And I'm just talking right now narrow-based AI, because it's just collecting data sets and it's making predictions that we couldn't see all the data when we're making predictions. So it's correcting errors faster. Yes, in the early days, we're helping train the AI. In the later days, we don't need to. It sees things we couldn't. And now, just if you think about how our economies are built, if our economies are built on narrow domains where the best in any field gets paid way more than the second best, third best, everything else, and a distribution of income because of that. And even in that narrow field, AI becomes the best and it's free. Doesn't it change everything?
Yeah.
And so you actually don't even need, so when people are talking about AI, what a lot of people get confused at, even in my book, because they're so scared of the fact, they think of it as a light switch moment. One day we have it, one day one day we don't have it, next day we do. It doesn't matter. The entire thing is deflationary all the way through. And to point out the craziness of this, one of my friends runs a robotics AI company where he's building general purpose AI, whether he's going to be successful or not. But he also started a company, D-Wave, one of the quantum computer companies, and he believes he will be successful, as do a whole bunch of other people. But his COO said to me, said on a stage, and I heard, this is a $10 trillion opportunity. And I pulled her aside afterwards and I said, you got to be kidding me, right? I said, if you're successful, it means we don't need any jobs. if we don't need any jobs, then how is it a $10 trillion opportunity? But it's those things that don't go together. We hold on to our own old framework.
Yeah.
And we talk about a business that is changing the old framework without realizing the consequences of changing the old framework.
Right. Wow. Interesting. So I guess a couple of things there resonated with me. One, you said we have this narrow use cases for AI today that are super effective, right? We're outcompeting the best human or teams of humans in the world, but we haven't been able to, I guess, broaden the scope of that to something more generalized, where we're still the best across multiple domains, I guess, compared to an AI.
Right.
But this sort of harkens back to your point earlier about disruptive tech, that it has to go narrow before it goes broad. So are we just seeing that with AI? It's just going narrow for now until we can synthesize these multiple narrow AIs into a general AI?
So the compute power would have to advance. So if you just did it based on current algorithms and machine learning, and you took that out and kind of a bigger brain and broadened that, it would take, now it can happen at some sort of path along compute power and energy. That can happen.
Yeah.
But it's almost a brute force calculation.
Hmm.
In all the while, there's other algorithms and things that are changing, that will likely change the way it's done now to apply a different purpose. There's one of the top researchers in this field is in actually UBC and is a friend of mine, but probabilistic programming. Whether that is the breakthrough or not, but it could be one of the breakthroughs that changes this and advances general purpose AI faster. the point is, it almost doesn't matter how fast this space is moving. We are going to at some point cede our top of the food chain to machines. And what that means, and how much better, faster, cheaper, everything else that can be, that things can be done. It's just, it blows your mind, because every single industry, we already see it.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about. So it's happening then from two sides. We have the AI productivity being improved through, ventures like your friends, where they're actually trying to increase, I guess, the sophistication of the artificial intelligence, but also, like we talked about last time, there's this collapsing cost of energy as well.
Right.
So you could actually, it relieves the power constraints on AI such that you could push more through it. So yeah. I guess the total productivity of the AI is really being improved at the AI level and the energy input level, to the point where it's just pushing it up these utility hierarchies for jobs. And it sounds like nothing is safe, right?
Yeah, and in the end, nothing is safe. Are there tons of opportunities right now to create different businesses? It's incredible. There's so many opportunities to create different businesses, to deliver value differently right now. But in the end, all of those opportunities are deflationary.
Yeah.
They remove labor and they give us more for less. And that is the nature of technology, and it gets better and better every year. And it's the nature of some of the technologies that we're using that are when I use that match versus the sun, let's back up. So what drove that conversation was Mark Carney on stage talking about electricity as a general purpose technology, and going through all the charts on, essentially, if you backtrack to where we are in the world today, that a lot of people think we're in the world today, they're using historical norms on other general purpose technology to compare where we are in a technology super cycle today, which is totally different. And that's what Mark Carney was doing. And he was showing kind of what preceded World War I and II was technology driving change and reducing costs and removing labor. And governments printing against that to try to stop that and destroying the currencies. That's what preceded everything. Yeah. And then on the backside of that, you had energy being kind of a base layer, and a whole bunch of new industries that could build on top of that. And he said, so we're experiencing. So he went on and showed all the charts and graphs and said, we're experiencing that today, and it'll look the same on the backside of this. Hopefully we can get through without wars and everything else, but on the backside of this, there's gonna be way more jobs and everything else. Mm-hmm. And I said to him after he spoke, I said, I don't remember anybody saying that energy was exponential. It wasn't something that was getting better, doubling each year, or doubling every year and a half in its power. And I also don't remember anybody thinking that energy would be smarter than mankind or humankind. Yeah. And those are two pretty big variables that you leave out when you're comparing one set of circumstances to another. Right. They're apples and oranges. You cannot use historical data about the time we were going through then to equate to what we're going through now. It's totally different.
Well, yeah, it just propels you straight into the realm of science fiction almost.
And we'll look around. Some of the stuff that we see every day is out of science fiction.
Yeah,
it's and it's moving faster and faster and faster. Our ability to understand how fast this is coming into question. It changes so many beliefs, right, that we had, and those beliefs we don't want to let go. It's really hard to let go.
Yeah, I recall even as a kid seeing a movie with people participating in a video call as we are now, and thinking that was this outlandish sci-fi technology, and now here we are, just a couple decades later. And I think so. One of those, and we've touched on this before, but one of those paradigms I feel impelled to reiterate this, that people are stuck in, is that we need jobs, right? Like jobs are the thing that make the world go round. Like you need a job, you need to hold on to a job. It's your means of security, it's your means of contribution to society, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the point here is that when we innovate, a successful innovation in the marketplace that eliminates a category of jobs is actually a positive thing, right? It may not feel positive during the transition when all of a sudden the candle maker, the inventor of the light bulb has displaced the candle maker, and he's, got to retool his skill set and go back into the marketplace and figure out what he's going to do. But the net productivity gain accretes to society. And then all of a sudden, everyone in the world has been given more freedom, right? They get more light, more hours of the day, more cheaply to read and study and go and do other things. So it's improving, it's advancing civilization. Although
So Robert, this is such an important topic. Like we just need to exclamation mark,
yeah.
because it's what policymakers and a lot in the Bitcoin community and everything else, you hear everybody saying, grow, 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 grow.
Yeah.
We're going to grow. We're going to grow. We're going to grow. Growth today is the removal of jobs. And then everybody says, well, we need to retrain those people to find other jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, how are you going to do that against AI? Fast enough that AI doesn't eclipse the next one and the next one and the next one. How is that possible? What we need to do is understand growth today in a digital world with AI coming means more freedom and letting prices fall to match that. To match that, it doesn't mean trying to hold prices high and retrain a whole bunch of people for new jobs that are going to be gone.
Yeah.
Growth today is totally inverted from the way that we used to look at it against an inflationary monetary policy.
Yeah, it's a great point. So the other thing you said earlier, 10,000 hours of training to reach this level of mastery. I forget what author put that out, but it's pretty popular metric. It's as if we're all born with this. Well, let's just say not born. In youth, you have more of a pluripotentiality. You can do a lot of things. You can go a lot of different directions. You're uncarved block, so to speak. And then you have to pick a direction eventually, right? You go, elementary school, high school, pretty generalized. You get into college, you start to get more specific. Maybe you go to a vocational school and get a little more specific before that. But you have to narrow down your possibility set to really specialize at something and get good at it. And it sounds like this technology could actually give us more potentiality over time. So we wouldn't need, people would still specialize, but you wouldn't have to specialize in these things that, these mechanical facets of life that could just be provided by software or AI. Maybe accounting comes to mind. I'm a trained accountant, but I could see a world where a lot of the things you do as a CPA, there are strategic elements, but there are a lot of elements that are dry code, so to speak, that an AI could provide. If you could satisfy all of that with software and relieve the accounting profession of this, call it, 50 or 80% of its workload, then you've given this whole army of people more freedom and time to go out and do other things. I start to see the technology in a very positive light when I think of it that way. What's the flip side to that? Is there a dark side to that, or is it just the transition that people?
The flip side is if you stay in inflationary monetary policy and you remove their labor, where do they go? That's what's happening. You're pushing prices up, and you're causing people to, oh my God, what am I going to do when my job's gone?
Right.
And rebel against both the technology that's moving anyways, it's going to happen anyways, and fight that because of fear. So they're holding on to something they know because of fear, because they can't see the way that it's going to look in the future, because the system is incongruent with the way it's going to look like and what it's going to look like in the future. But holding on to that belief system about what it looks like now is causing more and more pain, because everybody is self-motivated. They think about themselves and their family and everything else. So they're working really hard to try to outrun it, to save more money, to outrun it, so they can one day retire.
Right.
Well, both sides are advancing and making that harder and harder for them to do. So you run into a whole bunch of fear, and those are the people that still have jobs.
So
Right?
this
Those are
is
the people. There's a whole bunch of people that don't, or that have media that are on the bottom, that have no idea that what we're talking about. And so what they would do is they would look at technology and they would rebel against technology, and it must be the technologies, or it must be the monopolies, or anything else. We're actually concentrating monopoly power by running a system of inflation against a technology deflation. We're concentrating monopoly power. We're making the monopolies way stronger.
So the way I think about this, I hope it's useful for the audience as well, is through quantitative easing or expansion of the money supply, it's the currency issuer, the central bank, and whoever gets the money first, basically, they're harvesting this economic surplus created by technology. So technology is pushing prices down globally. That would typically,
or it wants to.
Or it wants to.
It wants to.
Yeah,
it's not, because the central bank policies, inflation has to overcome that deflation with
Right.
more monetary easing. In fact, when you see inflation rates, when people talk about the Chapwood index or different inflation rates for the CPI, and most people go in and say, how dare they? This is a total bullshit number,
Yeah.
right? And the CPI, and that might be true, or some of that, but most of it is caused by this. Why they've been over is because technology is moving faster, and they keep on printing more to try to outrun it, and lower interest rates to try to outrun it, and it keeps on running away on them.
Right.
And they don't know what they're doing. It's a structural change. They can't, and that's only going to get worse.
Yeah, because what they're chasing is moving exponentially.
Yeah, what would you do? What would you do as a CEO if you're trying to create value as fast as you can, and if you can create more value by removing labor, you're going to remove labor by creating more value. So and if you're in a system where labor is getting more expensive, or it's just harder and harder, you're
Right.
going to do it faster.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of mind bending in a way. I think so. If I can string a couple of things together here, which I guess I would call this the end of jobs formula. Like, okay, we have solar energy falling on the earth. 2 hours of sunshine globally is enough to power the world for a year if we harnessed it properly. You then layer in robotics, nanotechnology, 3D printing, that's actually doing, I guess, a lot of the actual productive labor.
Yep.
AI
on top of that.
And then AI facilitating all of the process flows between energy and final product output.
Yep.
I mean, what jobs are left at that point? And people are just.
That's the thing. And when I was really, as I wrote that chapter, and as you're really thinking about it, okay, I was thinking, where could you be because if you could create new industries faster than that was happening,
Mhm.
then you could still grow. You could create new labor pools and everything else. And there's some new, as the transition happens, there's pockets of new growth. So solar is going to be a huge pocket of new growth.
Mhm.
Right? So there's going to be net new jobs in solar as the infrastructure is built out. But after the infrastructure is built out, it's probably not as many new jobs.
Mhm.
So that's a kind of an infrastructure play. And then look to other industries where the amount of new jobs could outpace the ones that are going away, and add AI and what's happening. And it's impossible. It's just, I would love to, if anybody doesn't believe that, or if anyone has problem, debate me on that.
Mhm.
Tell me which industry because when you understand how fast these technologies are moving, and that computers look at the Boston Robotics dog, look at a video from 10 years ago, look at today.
Yeah.
Or the robot, and look at it falling down, could stand, and everything else, and now look what it can do. And now it's moving out into the field. Some of these things are scary, yet they're coming anyways. And think about the next step. That's only in 10 years that you had something that had to be held up, was walking, that looked like kind of a drunken sailor to doing backflips and dancing and everything else all on its own. That's in a 10-year time frame, looking backwards against this technology. Looking forwards, it's just it blows your mind with what it does. And then if you think about, okay, now you can miniaturize all this technology, and the technology could build other technology and AI on top of it. It's hard to see any industry being safe from automation.
And it's only going to get faster, not only because of the tech feeding back onto itself, but by creating, through more innovation, we're freeing more of the workforce to seek other means of employment, right? People need to spend less hours working per week to satisfy their basic needs in this, not netting out inflation for a minute.
Yeah, not in the existing system.
Yes.
In the existing system, it's counter to that.
Yes.
In the system that will emerge, it's going to be congruent.
We could say for Bitcoiners today, this is happening. If you're holding
for Bitcoiners, what they see is everything going down in price.
Yes.
And
we're living in that
and if you measure in Bitcoin, you already see reality, and it'll just keep on getting better forever.
So the force of entrepreneurs are further being unleashed on these problems. So you're going to have more and more minds working on these problems to make things even better as the world sort of transitions to Bitcoin as well. So it's only going to get faster. There's no leveling off to this.
Yeah. So let's back up to kind of what's happening, and let's tie something I wrote about in the book. But I heard you the way you explained it was even better than I wrote about in the book. So, but and on a different podcast. So information wants to be free.
Mm-hmm.
So when why the printing press was such a great deal is it opened up a whole bunch of new minds to the collective. And the first people that used the printing press and most of the books that came out of that were the churches and everything else to entrench ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But as more people were added, some of those ideas didn't match with reality. And so people had no idea that broke a belief system that the church, because that's where everybody used to get their information.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those new ideas then had to kind of be challenged. A lot of bad ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of good ideas too, that then broke down institutions, because a really good idea or really an idea that's time has come is unstoppable.
Yeah.
And so, but that created an incongruence with the belief system of the church, and it forced the church to, what do? I fight it,
right.
Which happened.
Yeah.
Right. Try to stop the belief system from getting out there. But the belief system, that idea, that information growing and expanding and error correcting, corrected a whole bunch of errors in our belief system.
Yeah.
And that changed. And if you look at the scientific revolution, Renaissance age, all of a bunch of the things came out of the printing press.
Right.
As a result, what's happening today with Bitcoin is actually the same thing at a different scale. It's building on top of all this knowledge and it kind of, each innovation builds on previous innovation and a bunch of other really great thought before it. And it's breaking down mental models that we believe in. So today, my book, for instance, Bitcoin, for instance, people are seeing things that they would have never seen before. And it forces them to ask the question, why do I believe in inflation?
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be an answer on the other side. And when the answer is hand waving, because it's always been this way, or if the answer is, and now a whole bunch of people are asking those questions and constantly asking those questions, and there doesn't seem to be any answers. And it's building knowledge base over and over and over again at a rate that we can't even comprehend. So some of the ideas, even in my book, but so I don't know which ideas were mine and which ideas weren't totally mine. I heard something, but I didn't pay any attention to it from somebody long ago, and then I built on it to make it mine and everything else. And I didn't try to. I tried to reference every single person in the book that I that built the ideas on, but you can't, because you don't know which ones they were blind to me, right? And now I think about, and now I look at what's happening even in Bitcoin Twitter and everything else. And the amount of ideas that are coming in to expand at a rate that is impossible to stop.
Yeah.
And that knowledge base and is building and building on this. And I'm going to take that idea and refine it more. I'm going to take that over here, and I'm going to move it over here. This idea into energy. Is there in the existing system, is there a whole bunch of FUD that we believe because we've always believed it? And just like the printing press broke the power of the church, and gave society a whole bunch of abundance and learning to another level because of information, and because of information that was error corrected. That's what's happening today. Those ideas cut through, and it forces a question on the other side. It forces it, not it forces it, it demands an answer. And when that answer is hand waving, people start to realize, and that's actually what's happening in a bunch of the people in Bitcoin that are super deep down the rabbit hole. They've already gone through almost 6 months, a year of rewiring their brain to realize, oh, wow, all of this belief system over here that maybe I believed too, but is radically wrong. And so when new people are coming in, it feels like a religion. But there's nothing more fact based than in the most part than some of the best people in Bitcoin Twitter. It's really evidence based, fact based, and so I love that. And you're adding new minds all the time. The best people, the best people in it are celebrating those new minds. Right. They're building onto, they're pointing to those people. So but it's remarkable. And that idea, it's unstoppable. That's why the idea itself is unstoppable, because the technology allows that information to be free. Right. And the existing system has to defend why it shouldn't be.
Right. It's a brilliant way to look at it. This lens of the Enlightenment itself being a result of the technological shift that decreased the cost of information distribution so we could error correct more quickly. And some of the largest expressions of that error correction were moving from a geocentric to a heliocentric model of the solar system, right? I guess Newtonian mechanics came off the back of this. We started to error correct. The church is not the dominant institution of the universe, right? There's this whole other branch of reality called science that's changed the world in a lot of ways. And all this was rooted in just making information cheaper, right? We were able to increase thought and error correction much more quickly. And I think one of the ones, and this is where memes are so interesting, as you were alluding to about Bitcoin, it's like you see people in the Bitcoin community, it sounds crazy because they're telling you everything in your worldview is wrong, basically, and here's the truth. But that meme, the orange pill, that really, that people can relate to that movie, The Matrix. There's a lot of allegory and I guess insinuation of kind of the relationship between citizen and government in that movie. So that meme really takes hold. And now it's like everyone's talking about the orange pill. There's the orange pill podcast, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like one of those memes that's taken hold recently is in the wake of COVID is this: if they can just print money, why do I pay taxes?
Right.
And I haven't. To your point, the question's been asked. The answer is, what's the answer? I haven't heard a good answer to that yet. I mean, it's very
there isn't a good answer. The answer is taxes. So they can get all the money they want through printing money.
right.
So
That's
that's the answer. And that printing is a redistribution of wealth to the wealthiest.
Yeah.
From the poor. That's what it is, and there is no good answer. I put out a tweet yesterday. In 2019, if you taxed 100% of the profits of every company in the U.S., you tax everything.
Yeah.
It's 2.25 trillion. Last year, last year you printed over 5 trillion.
Yeah.
Wow. So the taxes is a way of saying we care.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do anything.
That's incredible.
It's a redistribution away, or it's a distribution away. So I inflate faster.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to charge some taxes to redistribute, so I can pay some people money to keep up the charade.
Yeah. It's just, and then so in this digital enlightenment, which I think is probably the right term, that people are just waking up to these illusions, that we've once again found a technological medium that accelerates error correction to such a great degree, just without even introducing AI, just people on Twitter exchanging ideas or whatever social media or digital platform. Ideas move much more fluidly across the world. Memes have really become a thing. Dawkins wrote about memetics 30, 40 years ago, but now they've just now really come into their own, and that people know what a meme is. It's a highly compressed narrative, right? You just put a few words on a picture, and then people can then anchor their experience or relation to the message in that movie or whatever the comedic scene is, and they can derive a lot more meaning from it in a lot less space, right? Instead of reading a whole book, you can just compress all that into a picture. A picture's worth 1,000 words, kind of thing. I wonder though, so this is something I think about as well, is so the job of an entrepreneur is that they are trying to map their current actions or production to the anticipated future structure of consumption. So they're trying to be where the puck is going. They're trying to create something that people will need in the future.
Yep.
There's some gap between the cost of inputs and what they think they can sell outputs for, that they think they can exploit in the future. So it's looking around the corner. That's what entrepreneurship is. So they're trying to fit, again, current action to future market data. Won't AI accelerate this as well, or at least augment this? Because AI is giving us a new way to look into the future.
Absolutely. First, let's break down what you just said a little bit more. And so what Elon Musk does in the first Roadster, I project out exponential trends. I give you a picture of a car with a whole bunch of specs I can't deliver now.
Mm-hmm.
I charge you for it and deliver it 2 years later when I can deliver it against the right. So I don't charge you the whole thing, but I charge you a deposit, and that proves I have a viable business model as I build into the exponential trend.
Yeah.
And what I do is I start at the high part of the market. Right. So people that can afford to pay, wait, everything else. And but I'm forecasting the trends on the exponential battery power, battery technology, everything, automation. I'm forecasting those trends, knowing that I'm not going to stay at the top end. That's just then I do it again on the next car. And I forecast the trend, and I can't do it right away. I can't deliver that. If I said I'm going to deliver this year, no chance. But I charge you forecasting the next trend and building that. So that's part of that. But that talks about the production of the car. He's also forecasting the change in business models that is a result of having artificial intelligence it essentially pick up a car for you. So,
Mm.
or be your driver. And forecasting a trend that it doesn't need to be on LiDAR, I can do it in a different way that's cheaper, more effective. And I can, because I have all these cars on the road, I can beat everybody to the market. And essentially what ends up happening is the best algorithm wins. The best algorithm wins by having the most data connections. So once you hit that network effect on data, everybody uses the best algorithm because the second best one is not good enough.
Right.
So they make they make it better and better and better. So if you forecast that trend out, and you have self-driving cars essentially owned by Tesla, and they license it to other car manufacturers, and they build a service company instead of a car company based on that service energy car company, it looks totally different than a car company. And so it's a business model change and a technology change by forecasting what's coming across orthogonal technologies and what you're able to do differently with those with that. And when you said production, we used to buy a record or a CD, and we had tons of CDs. I threw mine out a couple of years ago. That you'd buy, so you'd buy the entire thing, so you could have one of the songs, and today we can't even listen to all the music that we have access to, and the delivery mechanism for that looks like a platform, like Spotify. It looks totally different than and it's just information. Yeah. And so it's aggregating that information in a different way. And most of the industries are going to change to look like that, because then our belief system changes. We think we want a record, and we think we want storage of a record or a CD. We don't. We want access to the music.
Right.
And if somebody solves that in a different way that gives us way more for less, we use it all day long.
Yeah. It's a great point. This reminds me again that all goods are services.
Right.
One of the things you said earlier about ideas, right? We don't even know where our own stop and others begin. We're kind of this just nexus of ideas from other people we've interacted with or read throughout our lives. There was this I listened to this podcast recently between Jordan Peterson and Matt Ridley. Matt Ridley is the author of a book called The Rational Optimist and a few others. He's a really good writer. And he made the point that he was reading a book by someone else that made the point that by capitalism is what lets us more narrowly specialize in production so that we can each more diversify our consumption. So each of us gets really good at one thing, providing one or a few things. And the net result of that is that we all get to enjoy many things, right? The widest possible selection of things. That's the magic of capitalism. So Matt Ridley says he writes the author a note saying, hey, that's a really brilliant idea. Where did you get it? And the author writes him back. He goes, well, I got it from one of your books.
Yeah.
It's amazing how we don't, which just highlights the whole ridiculousness of intellectual property. And so you can't really own an idea. It's another thing that Carl Jung said, that Jordan Peterson has said before, that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. So
right.
We almost have to invert the way we look at it. Information is coursing through us generation to generation in all of our interactions. And we're just kind of along for the ride. We're not actually the owners or creators of that information even.
You just your point there just makes me laugh. In my former business, Bill Direct, one of the ideas that I read, it was a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, and it was a framework for growth and communication and alignment and learning. Really curiosity, drive debate across the organization, and I loved it. And so we implemented that like down to the sand. We got so good at it, and our business was doubling every year and everything else. And out of that, I got to know the author. And the author then wrote his next book about a whole bunch of the things that we did and asked the same thing. He goes, "Where did you get this?" "We got it from you. We did this." And so then it was a little tweak, and he wrote an entire next book around some of the things that we did on his framework to be able to take that further. So I totally buy what Jordan Peterson and Matt Ridley said. And that's what happens. And a lot of times, our subconscious or our idea, we're so focused on what we need to do for the thing, we miss it. The thing we hear doesn't enter into our subconscious. It doesn't even, and we don't even know we've heard it, or we kind of recognize we've heard it, and that's what ends up happening. But when you're ready to hear it, it just, you can't unhear it.
Right.
So what you're finding right now around the Bitcoin space, or my thesis, let's say in deflation, is once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
It is something that is true, and if technology and information keeps advancing, will be more true, and it forces a new paradigm of a way we deal with it, whether we like that or not.
Yeah.
Whether we say we don't want it to be true,
Right.
it is true. And so we better start to think about how do we build the bridge to the other side,
Right.
because it is true.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe you experience this as an author as well. My best ideas come to me when I'm not engaged at all in studying or learning. I'm typically walking in nature, or I'm at the gym, or I'm, the classic shower thought thing. And I wonder if the other optimistic perspective on this future we're talking about is that more people will have more freedom to have those flashes of insight and just doing whatever they enjoy doing.
When you look at when you look at it's a puzzle. So Newtonian physics and Maxwell and building on that puzzle that doesn't go together with space, time, they're different things.
Mm.
There's Einstein comes out and has to solve the riddle.
Mm.
And so it bugs you. It just, you're constantly searching, trying to put together the pieces to actually simplify formulas rather than make them more complex.
Mm.
Right. So and so that's what ends up happening. And what you just said about zooming out, or having a riddle in your brain that you can't solve. That, for the riddle in my brain that I couldn't solve, was, why isn't everything getting cheaper if technology is moving at this rate?
Right.
And it was like 10 years. I laughed just the other day, now 12 years. I laughed because my former co-founder in that business said to me, he goes, "This is something that you've been talking about for 10 years. I know you didn't want to write the book. This is something you talk about everywhere to everyone." And I said, "Yeah, have beers with me one night. That's what we talk about." And I said, "I'm sorry to you and everybody else, but it was that riddle that I just couldn't solve, that I just had to solve, or figure out what that looked like." But I think that's and to do that, you have to step back from the system.
Yeah.
And when you say walking around, so you're curious about something,
Yeah.
it forces different questions. That curiosity takes you down a path you don't know where it's going to go, right? For you, and then you're walking in the forest, or you're in the shower, and you go, bingo, when you're not ready for it. And this insight comes in that kind of puts the pieces together in a different way. And I love that. It is it's actually a thing that I love most about working with young entrepreneurs on new businesses, trying to solve that riddle. It's such a fantastic time. It's the thing I love being on this podcast with you, because you think like that. Preston Pish thinks like that. There's a bunch of different people in this community that think like that, and the best information wins. And they're not afraid to promote somebody else with really great information,
Right.
Because they're it's because they really care about the riddle. They really care about the right answer.
Yeah. No, I think the entire framework of looking at the world like that, where ideas are primary, it's very ego minimizing
Right.
and very humbling, frankly, when you start to look at this giant heritage of ideas, you know, the proverbial shoulders of giants on which we all stand. I think when, maybe this is an age thing as well, when you're a little bit younger, you think you've got a better grip on things, or you know, you think you've got it all figured out. You know, you might be a little more arrogant in your mental models or beliefs, but typically with time and experience you get humbled through various experiences. And I've just found myself shifting from this worldview of thinking like, oh, I've got a handle on the way the world is, to where now I'm like, oh my goodness, this thing is just so vast and complex. I have no idea about anything. It's kind of like the Socrates thing, like all I know is that I know nothing at all.
Yeah, and when you think about that, measure a system from within the system. So what everybody's doing today, if you go back to this whole thing, so if you're on a plane and somebody walks down the aisle, you know how fast they're going.
Right.
But they're going that fast relative to you on the plane.
Right.
So the observer on the planet on the Earth, they're going a totally different speed. If they could see that person walking through the fuselage of the plane, if they could see, they're going a totally different speed, and the Earth is moving a totally different speed, and the observer outside the Earth, and so when you think about what that means, when we talk about all of these things that matter so much to us in this grand illusion of space and time, it just puts it in perspective. And how can you not be humble? When I think about all of the ideas, when people say, oh, you're so bright, I think, are you kidding me? Look at the people around me. I'm scared to talk to that person. But how many ideas, how much intellect is out there when you're actually not afraid to have the humility in it and celebrate others who are contributing ideas.
Yeah, it's, you know, such a necessary element of learning, as you need to have the humility and openness to want to approach it. The other thing, you know, we're constantly saying intellect and this smart, but it's so much more varied than that. There's so many different ways people think, and just the ways they see the world. You know, some people are visual, some people are verbal, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder, so getting back to that, the big idea, the error correction is the basis of all intelligence, then this connects a lot of things for me. So we would say consciousness itself, or maybe not consciousness, maybe just we'll stick with intelligence, constantly refitting the way it sees the world to what the world actually is. So it's learning through pain. You know, anytime there's misfitness between the model, or we could say the map and the territory, whereas the intelligent force is assimilating that to update its map, basically. So that's kind of, we have that between our ears, but then we also have this intelligent force, the distributed intelligent force of the market, right? We're wiring all of our intellects together via the price, mostly. You know, there's also words moving back and forth, but price is really what's driving human action. And so that is the real force at play here. We have this the ultimate distributed computing power in the sphere of human affairs, which is the free market itself. And it's creating tools and prices that advance its own error correction even further. And this gets into I guess Karl Popper was an empirical reductionist, perhaps. And I know he was very influential on Taleb's thinking in Via Negativa, where all of our knowledge grows by subtraction, effectively. So we're disproving hypotheses through the scientific method largely, and then whatever's left over is knowledge, basically. So Karl Popper's quote was, quote, "All of our knowledge grows only through correcting of our mistakes," unquote. And if we're handicapping ourselves, we're through central planning, effectively, we're saying we have all these unlimited problems. We have the greatest problem solving force in the world, which is the free market. But we're going to forego that problem solving force and instead assign this responsibility to a handful of politically favored bureaucrats. I mean, how long do you think this can even hold up in the digital age?
It's a really important concept, and it's a really important concept for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is number one. That type of system always aggregates to kind of the biggest guns or the most control or the biggest thug. So communism always that's what it looks like. It's a system by control, and it is not efficient based on a free market. It can't learn at the rate because you're having to aggregate information into people to make mistakes, into a number of people, and abandoning a whole bunch of choices made into the market. So it's impossible for that system to be as efficient. If that system isn't as efficient, then living standards must decline. Mm. And so Bitcoin, what most people don't realize is actually Bitcoin defunds communism. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to retain control. It's within a Bitcoin type of system because the free market wins, and it forces that knowledge out to society, and the productivity gains from that knowledge to the widest possible audience in society. And that's why it's so congruent to where technology is moving. It's a requirement, and I've put this out quite often, but it's important to keep on saying. Technology today, whether I like it or not, requires a currency that allows for deflation. It's a requirement. Every other path concentrates wealth, power, and ends in control by the state. Every other path, there isn't, and that might not have been true. It would have happened slowly in a time where technology wasn't. It still happened, but it happened slowly where people didn't notice. In a time before technology moving at this pace, but it doesn't matter what was true. It's what's true now. When the facts change, smart people change.
It's a great point. So we could almost equate knowledge to freedom in a way, and that, which is actually calls a quote to mind that I use in one of my pieces: "Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave." So it's as if, we're error correcting both in our own lives and in the marketplace, and in error correcting, we're harvesting knowledge effectively of how to deal with these problems again in the future. It's not just solving today's problem. It's not just putting food on the table today. It's how we're going to put food on the table for the next year, or the next decade.
Right.
How do we build things that are persistent across time? That's very important.